Uh,
Both.
It records, but it also will stream live to your YouTube, so you can invite people who are not invited to participate to watch.
Okay.
So we had talked about, Susan had mentioned talking about goals a little bit, a goals reflection that we've been doing. And I had added at the last minute maybe a template, talking about the template that people are using for their PLPs. And I just wanted to know how things are progressing up at Peoples and get a sense of where you are. And then if we have time, maybe we could talk also about just some constructivist stuff, I guess, that we've been doing here and how that's relating to standards. And I did a quick survey of transferable skills this week with my kids. And so maybe we can talk about tying the standards in as well. But I guess, Maura, I saw from Susan's notes that you guys had done some goal-related things with MRGs, right? And if you just maybe want to talk about that, that'd be great.
Yep. So the 3 MRGs that we're doing this year is set goal, solve problems, and express. And within that, there are all these like mini components or examples of how students could show that in ways that they're supposed to show that they've mastered these 3 skills by the time that they graduate. And it's in this really clunky language, and even as adults we've kind of been struggling with the language. And so what we did as a 7th grade team is we gave all of our kids the standards, like the 3 mission-related goals, and we had them go into small groups, and they had to create like a poster that described the mission-related goal in a way that would make sense to kids and also have a visual to go along with it. And so kids went through and they produced some like incredible work, really thinking through like what each of the bullet points meant. And they went through and worked with a lot of the vocabulary, tried to really dissect it and figure out what the true essence of the MRG meant. And then we had students sort of vote, and we had our sort of 3 final posters, if you will, or representations of each of the MRGs. And so we have those in our classrooms now, and that just helped us because we were asking students to keep track of when they were showing mastery of the MRGs, but they weren't identifying them because they didn't really understand what they were. And so that was really helpful, and we have them all over the place now, and so it just has made it more clear for them, I think. And so that's sort of what we did.
So they're all posters that you've just put up on the wall so they can see it when they're focusing on their goals?
Yeah, and I mean, we use the language in our class a lot, but I think having them sort of take ownership of it, and we made it like we did gallery walks, and each student voted on which one they liked the best, and they got really into it, and so I think it just sort of helped for them to see like what it was to be able to like identify it within themselves. That makes sense?
Now, what's the next step going to be once they kind of understand the MRGs in student language?
So our goal is that in March we have our 2nd student-led conference, and students are going to be able to show evidence of them using these 3 MRGs in their sort of approaching their goals, like mastering their goals, achieving their goals, that's the word I was looking for. And so they're having to collect evidence constantly throughout throughout the week to then, for their student-led presentations, they're going to have examples of mastery of those 3 MRGs.
Okay, so they're not going to, so they're not picking their own goals. They're picking how they're mastering these particular goals.
No, they have their own goals.
Is there going to be a discussion around how their own goals also connect to these MRGs?
Yeah. Yep. And so that's what the hope is, that in March they're talking about achieving their own goals And then with the evidence of them working towards their goals, they'll say, and this is how I, was able to solve problems. So they're kind of like cross-referencing the two things.
And Maura, if they can't cross-reference, it's just because it's not a good fit at this point, right?
Yeah, and we're really trying to get them to like find passion in their goals. And so for some of my kids, they're still trying to figure out like how to create a goal. And so we're really working with them. So I'd say like we have kids at all different stages, and that's sort of like the aiming high would be having kids being able to cross-reference. But for some of our kids, it's just to say, I have this goal, and it's meaningful to me, and I'm working towards it. So that would be sort of like the low-level hope.
Now, with these student conferences, are they going to be referencing other types of standards too, or is the focus going to be really, here are my personal goals, this is how the 3 MRGs are related to what I'm trying to do with those goals, and then you're going to ask them to then say, and here's something I did in math, how it's part of me achieving my personal goal. But then are you going to have them also cross-reference or tabulate the actual Common Core, or how are you doing that?
I'm wondering more. I'm wondering if it would help me if you just spun one of the examples. So would it help to talk about a particular kid and her or his goals?
Yeah, I could definitely do that. So one of my students' goals is to be more creative in her expression in her core classes. And so she's been finding evidence of when she's able to use, like she's really big into visual arts. And so she is tracking evidence of when she's able to use art in the core classroom. And so for her, she has some of those academic pieces in there, like work that she's proud of. But then I have another student whose goal is to design his own skateboard. One of his goals. He also has academic goals. And so, like, that would be sort of a trickier one to then cross-reference to the content. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It depends on what you're doing in math and science, I suppose.
Right.
And how you're interpreting problem solving, for instance.
Yeah. That's true.
So I guess we've taken a different approach a little bit. For the past 2 weeks, my 7th graders were working on principles and values, where they identify. We talked a lot about what's important to them, what is a principle, what's a value, and they identified. We did a lot of brainstorming, and they identified 3 to 5 principles and values that were important, and then. I then took those principles and values, and then we had them reflect on the goals that they had made for trimester 2, and we tried to get them to identify places where their principles and values were demonstrated through the goals that they had set. And at the same time, with the 8th graders who've already done that, we started looking at the goals that they had set and whether or not they'd achieved those goals. And part of my teaching about goals was changed quite a bit. I went to Mike McCraith from Enosburg Falls, gave a workshop at our professional development. It was about social emotional learning, and he included quite a few resources about grit and about the growth mindset, and also about self-control and self-discipline. And so with the 8th graders, what we did is I kind of put together just a little presentation about those 3 things. Grit, growth mindset, and sort of self-discipline, and then we talked about those, and we talked about how those can be part of their achievement of their goals that they've selected. And then I asked them to, instead of writing a reflection about their goals and how they're doing on them, I asked them to create a short video, And so what they did is they created these short videos that were less than a minute, and I gave them hints on a script. So I said, you have to introduce yourself, you have to introduce your goal, what action steps you took, and then if there were any elements of the grit, self-control, or growth mindset that were involved in that process. So they spent a couple days filming those, they made those, and then that was week number 1. And then week number 2, they came back, and on James's recommendation, I just showed the kids 2 TED Talk videos, and there's a really great skiing video actually by this guy named Candide Thove.
Yeah.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
And
he's
so,
pretty extreme.
Right, and what I did is, but what was cool about that example was that the filming's tremendous. But anyway, we looked at those, and then I asked them the question, well, what makes a good video? And so we wrote down all these different elements of what we thought made a good video, and then what we did is we categorized those, and we came up with process, content, and then the skills required. And so then the kids went back, and this week they've looked at those goal videos, and then they've analyzed the video, and they've written a little reflection on the quality of their video and also the content of it. So we're kind of, as we're setting goals and as we're reflecting, we're also branching out into different ways of communicating that. And the kids also had the option, by the way, of doing a podcast on it. And so in that way, we're incorporating a lot of the technical skills and actually a lot of the transferable skills into the PLP process. And at the end, I guess it's been a long week, but I guess on Tuesday, I gave them the transferable skills, and I had them put a check mark next to each one that they thought they covered this year, and I'm collecting that data. And in class tomorrow, we're going to finish up our video reflection. And I just want to add, too, another step that we took was when we talked about what makes a good video, I had the kids do a little explanatory writing, and they posted that on Google Groups. And then that's where we got the criteria to analyze our videos from the kids' identification of what they thought made a good video. So a lot of this stuff is building on itself and having the kids demonstrate those, not only their goals and thinking about the growth mindset and the self-discipline and the grit, but also then demonstrating that kind of within the video.
But also this idea of kind of doing textual, or in this case, video deconstruction of what it means to do a high-quality video or even a high-quality writing. So in their reflections, they're actually showing the critical thinking skills that they needed using the criteria that they've come up with. So in some respect, it's also a piece of, it's also focusing on the literacy around focusing on not only just setting goals and then talking about whether or not you would attain them, but also the genre of the video, the genre of the reflection. So there's a lot of genre pedagogy that's going on from a literacy perspective too. So it's not just goals.
And one of the really interesting things, and I don't know why it hasn't dawned on me before, but I gave them the examples of the TED Talks, and I chose, I guess I just Googled the 10 best rated TED Talks of all time. One of them was Jane McGonigal, who's talking about gaming. Another one was about Amy Cuddy, who talks about power posing and how your body position can influence your power. And then the other one was that ski video. And I haven't gone back to this yet, but it's so obvious that the TED Talks are the explanatory writing, and the ski video is the narrative, right? And in the video, do you remember in the first part of the video where he puts on his ski goggles?
Yeah.
And he's looking in the mirror, right? And so you become that character, right? Because the way that he does that, you actually inhabit the character. And it's much different than the TED Talks where they're explaining to you some way of behaving. And the kids were really good at picking out what makes a TED Talk good. And they said there's a hook. Both of those speakers engaged the audience within the first minute. One started out with a question. One started out with a proposal that was pretty outrageous, that we need to game more. And so in looking at that, we also are looking at the structure of writing. because that's exactly what you tell the kid to do in the essay.
Right.
And so I think by paralleling those constructions, it helps the kids understand what's going to make a good video, what's going to make a good writing piece, and vice versa. So in that way, it was really kind of helpful to do that process. But one of the things I'm just really debating within my teaching and what we're doing about how much of the standards that I include in there, and how much language, and I'm starting to believe that I can get it all from the kids in some way, and then have them do things that then it's pretty easy to match up with the standards. But I haven't been able to articulate that fully just yet.
And I think for us, and me, I feel like you guys would be really good resources for this. So for student-led conferences in the fall, we just focus on goals, because it was our first student-led conference that we've ever done as a building, and we really wanted to set the tone with parents, like, your student is the one that's leading this meeting. We wanted to really empower our students, and so we didn't touch the academic pieces. And then for the spring, my team is kind of in this place where we're trying to figure out what the best move would be. Like, do we have students go through and pick out successes and challenges? Jordy and I use our Enduring Understandings, which are our social studies sort of like framework from the school district. And we use that language, and we have them posted in our room, and the students know what we're working towards. And so do we have them create a section on, their portfolio that has the Enduring Understanding with the matchup of the work that they've done and reflections, or do we just say, it's about the goals and them showing the evidence of growth over the year? And so we're kind of in this place of, do we show growth as a learner? Do we show growth on goals? Do we do both? Do we show their achievement of the standards? Like, we're kind of in this place, like, we're definitely doing MRGs and we're definitely doing goals, but we're not sure about the other stuff.
I think that's going to be a tension that's going to go forward for all teachers and teams around the idea of, do you have the PLP and the idea of goal setting from a student perspective be the priority, or is the priority and your responsibility to also have the students make the connections between the content standards, the literacy standards, the transferable skills. I mean, there's so many things to make connections to, and what's going to be the priority.
Right.
I don't know if anyone's really kind of articulated a good rationale for either, or can it be all?
I'll just put another layer on that. I think it's important that we continue to ask the question, what's the gap that the PLP and portfolio process is trying to fill?
Mm-hmm.
So because we choose not to invest in certain assessment priorities through the portfolio process does not mean we're abandoning assessment of those priorities. We have other assessment schemes at work. So we have SBAC, we have all that other stuff that we can lean on for assessing a whole slew of standards and facets of learning. We don't need to squeeze everything into the portfolio process.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that, and in fact, you're almost afraid to say it, right? But I'm like, the less we have to do with the standards, I mean, what's working for me is what's motivating the kids. And when I see my kids are engaged and working and sharing and collaborating, to me, that's what's the most important thing. If my kids are coming into class and they want to be here and they're doing something that they're interested in, I can take that and I can work with that. And I think that what the PLP is really doing for me is showing how important it is to really give students not only the ownership, but also this choice of what they want to do, and in a structured way. But for instance, today we were talking about visual aesthetics of their actual Google site, and I was giving examples of showing kids how kids had different layouts, and a kid independently figured out that on a Google site you can make it so the tabs at the top are all invisible until you press on them, and then they light up, right? I had no idea that that was even like possible. And here's a kid who's doing that, and we're showing it in the front of the room. And how is that not creative problem solving?
Right,
How is
right.
that not the transferable skill? And to me, that's where I don't need a standard. You know, I can do the standards later. To me, that's kind of authentic, and it's authentic intellectual work. But what's really more interesting to me is then the kids are teaching each other. And so one kid has put behind his profile a landscape that he made in Minecraft, which is, it's just amazing. And so another kid who, I'm going to post a blog on this, another kid went to France and he took a picture at the Louvre, and it's looking down a spiral staircase, and that's now his picture on his PLP. And so there's this idea of, I think, the adolescent brain and the creativity and letting them explore, that to me is proving more motivating and engaging for them. And I keep asking them the same question, do you like working on it? And it keeps coming back, yes. And as long as it keeps coming back that way, I'm not, you know what I mean? The proof is in the pudding, kind of.
And you know, in looking over these PLPs, because I get them in snapshots. I'm not in class with Don watching him do this all the time, but I've been, you know, working with him on, you know, every couple weeks, and what I'm seeing is especially the difference between what the 7th graders did last year and what those same 7th graders, now 8th graders, are doing this year, and just the mastery of how far they've gone. You know, I thought, would they plateau out? Would they say, I'm satisfied? And yet we're not seeing that. We're seeing them revise their goals. We're seeing them add new ideas, be more creative with their website, make more connections. And I think that's another thing that I've been impressed by. And, you know, it'd be nice to see that happen in the 9th grade, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
I think,
you know?
Also, just to sort of join that thought, I think that the PLP at the middle level is so powerful because it's so closely aligned with what they're going through physically, mentally, socially, which is this incredible growth and change over time. And if we can find a way of capturing that and showing their development and giving them this framework of a growth mindset and that the writing and revising process and working hard, then I think that that's going to help them transform into that high school student who's sort of ready and for the challenges that lie at that level.
Yeah, we've been having a lot of really great conversations about, you know, this is just our first year, and it's our first stab at it. And I think we're really craving that we had more time. Like, the only day that our schedule is flexible is on Fridays. So it's the only day that we can move things around to give students more time to work on PLPs, because we have to do an hour of math every day. And so that's kind of like an hour of math and an hour, 45 minutes of reading instruction every day for every kid. So that's like driving our instruction Monday through Thursday. And so we've started having conversations about next year, and we're like really, really hoping that we stay together as a team, because we are at this point now where, like, where can we make more time, and how can we really ask for more flexibility, and how can we like truly integrate all of our units, and how can we house it within, you know, students' goal setting, and really be able to collaborate more as a team. And so I think even from students from the very beginning of just setting the goals of I'm going to get a 90 in humanities to now, like, they're revising halfway through the year and coming up with, like, I want to use evidence to support my writing, because they've identified that that's something that they need to do. And like, I feel like they're starting to take leaps, and so hopefully, like, our students next year who've already gone through a year of goal setting and they know what it means to at least make a goal, will be able to do so much more with them, and it will kind of like drive them, because the hardest thing was having kids come up with goals. And I think a lot of that comes from, like, I think part of it is like this self-worth conversation for some kids. I think some of it is not knowing, you know, how to set a goal. And we did a lot of stuff with, like, growth mindset, and we do a lot of that within our teaching, but it just felt really overwhelming for them. And so now that they've had this experience, they're really starting to almost like take it more seriously, and think about, you know, what are the things that I can get behind and work really hard at. And we also like, so I took your idea of putting the goals like in front of you somehow, and so all kids have like a bumper sticker on their iPads now with an image and their 3 goals written, and all the teachers have them on their school laptops, including like any student teachers or anything. So the kids are seeing images of our goals that we have as well, and we talk about our goals all the time and their goals, and so I'm just really excited for where it can go.
Can I just add as well, Maura, that we've had the opportunity to watch your vertical teaming on your teams.
Yeah.
Even though the first year, the things that you've sort of begged, borrowed, and stolen from each other has been really interesting. And I think I heard Leslie on the 8th grade team think it was going to take a long time to ramp it up, but they're doing such great growth work in the 5th grade that they think that this is accelerating exponentially. So the idea that it could scale to your school would make maybe work in the 5th grade.
So does every kid in the middle school there have a PLP now?
Every kid in our school has goals. 5th grade, I believe they don't have like the house for it, like they don't have the Google site yet.
Right.
But 6th through 8th grade, every kid has a PLP.
So one of the things that's been the most powerful for us is just having our kids be presenting. So in our school, our team has sort of done the pilot project, but just this morning we sent one of my kids out to another TA on the other team, and she comes back 15 minutes later. It's like, okay, everybody's set up. They all have their PLP sites. And so she's teaching these kids. She's becoming this agent. And I think that the teaching potential is incredible. And she's actually been invited to go to another class next week to help them set up their PLPs. And I think that's also part of the system that I'm finding to be really powerful, is that kids are becoming experts at it, and that they can become then teachers and develop this idea of self-worth that would otherwise sort of be latent. And the more I'm up in front of the classroom talking, the less I feel like we're getting anything accomplished. It's almost like, why aren't we doing something more closely linked to the PLP, you know? And so, I mean, I don't know. It's just... well,
the students also teach the teachers. There's been a couple workshops where the students, it was a student panel one time, and then another time when they were showing the actual PLP, their own PLPs and how they built them and what they have on them, and really had a conversation with the teachers around what it takes to do it. The idea of having like these student ambassadors going out to either TAs or other parts of the school, I think is a great idea, because it's a different type of model of scaling up. Like your school, everyone did it all at once. Here, one small group started as a pilot, and now it's kind of spreading out.
And I know you're already doing this, but one of the things that I keep going back to also is the importance of a unified digital citizenship program throughout the whole school. Because what I've seen in my own experience is that when you have different levels of digital citizenship teaching going on, when there's not a strong foundation of that, I find that teachers and adults express sometimes fear of letting kids out into the unknown. And if you don't trust your kids to do the right thing, you're not going to open those opportunities for them. And so I know you guys are doing this, but as you start talking to other schools and other people, I think it's really important that we continue to emphasize the critical role that digital citizenship has. Because we've been, focusing on digital citizenship for probably 4 years in some way, and we talk about it on a regular basis. And that allows me to say to kids, kids come to me and say, oh, I'd like to try this. Okay, just be a good digital citizen. Yeah, they're going to make mistakes, but that allows us to give them the freedom that otherwise I don't think we'd be so willing to do. And I just find that's really important.
I think both the last few comments have, in my mind, referred to kind of cultural issues. And I'm particularly concerned that some of the statewide work and the high school level work is not attending to cultural issues. So what does it mean to develop a learning environment in which this sort of stuff can flourish?
Mm-hmm.
And as you raised, how do you communicate that either across a school, or I think the long-term issue is how do you continue to cultivate that culture? How do you continue to cultivate it both in kind of affective terms, but also in the nuts and bolts of how one develops a PLP? And I keep on getting drawn back to how looping teams, multi-age teams have tremendous advantages in those respects, you know, in terms of transferring a culture of digital citizenship, in terms of transferring to incoming students the culture of PLPs and the strategies of PLPs. All that stuff is facilitated best, I think, in a looping or multi-age environment. And I'll be interested to know how the people's teams transition next year, because they have set up subtly different cultures within their teams, but you're a straight grade configuration. So you're going to have to introduce kids to that subtly different culture every year.
Can I just piggyback on this? And I'm going to have to go. I apologize. I have to meet my girls. But I want to piggyback, John, on what you said, that I'm curious about what will happen when some of your 8th graders go into 9th grade and do some sort of small program work.
Right.
I think the shift in the change and their ability to talk about their own learning will be so profound that people will say, well, we need to keep cultivating this environment because that's the only way we can honor the multiple pathways.
I would like to hope that is the case. But, you know, I'm thinking of the 8th graders going into 9th grade at Montpelier High School and falling off a cliff and actually becoming kind of depressed and disengaged. Like, really? This is what we're doing now?
Right.
We've been doing all this cool stuff. We've been going forward this way, and now it's like we're back where we started back in 5th grade. So I'm wondering how we can communicate that across the kind of the divide between middle school and high school. That's the cultural issue here. It'll be interesting to see how that changes or how you deal with it at People's too. You're in the same building, but it's still a separate world.
Yeah, we're like light years away.
I don't see an option. I don't see a better option than to have students convey that. You know, so I think there's nothing more intimidating to a teacher who may be holding back his or her development than having kids appear smarter than they ever imagined. You know.
I guess my question is, how can we set up opportunities for students going into 9th grade to show teachers that will be teaching them where they are and what they're doing?
One of the things.
Go ahead.
So we were asked as a faculty to present the presentation that we gave at MGI to our high school faculty. So we did that, and we, you know, had some questions at the end, and I think they have some ways to go on sort of openness, but we pitched them. We said, you know, at the end of the year, our hope is that all of you attend our kids', you know, portfolio showcases. Like, we want you to sit down and sit at round tables with our kids as they're showing you the PLPs before you even have them in your classroom. And I think we kind of caught them off guard, but in a good way, and they were really into that. But I think that there needs to be conversations starting now. Like, I think June is too late. I think that they need to start thinking really critically about, like, the 9th grade team and what are they going to do. And, you know, they have multi-age TAs, I believe, but only the 9th graders are the ones that are going to be doing the portfolio. So where is it going to happen and who's going to be responsible for it? And so I think that there are some big conversations that need to be happening, which I'm sure John and Susan could probably speak into a little bit more. But I think it has to come from the kids. As engaging as I am, I don't think I do the trick. And I think that the kids really need to sit with their future teachers and help them to build that framework of like, this is what it would look like to be successful in ninth grade, because they've done it.
And Maura, I'll jump in fast too, that in the debrief, the folks on the ninth grade team said, holy cow, we've got to start talking about this now as well. And one of the language arts teachers said, we actually should get access to those PLPs well before the school ends. We're building the time if we're mindful about it now. So the time is really good on that.
So that sounds like, so when you were talking about the showcases, are these going to be like roundtable discussions where the kids sit at the table and then share with parents or with other peers and teachers?
So we're sort of in the planning phase, but we actually talked about this at our team meeting today, and our team is hoping to have like an open school where kids, like all kids, have their portfolios out, and we invite anyone from the community who wants to come in can come in, and parents will be there, and other teachers, and really anyone, so that the students can really show all the growth that they've had throughout the year. So there's going to be like the student-led conferences, but then we want to have like a big, like, show what you did day and make it big and have the community know what's happening in our school and the great work that the kids are doing. And so the hope is that that we'll be able to facilitate it in some way, so the students will be showing, like, I think the ultimate goal would be to be showing their parents, a teacher, a community member, and students. Other students on sort of like a panel, but I don't know. That's the dream.
That
sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of work, but it sounds really good.
I'm on it.
Hey, before we leave and you go skiing, I had a question about the tagging, and I saw your little video about tagging.
Oh my gosh, it's going viral.
Yeah.
Got 2 hits now.
Well, I have 1 million Twitter followers. I sent it out to all of them. But I was wondering, can you tag in Google Sites?
I don't know.
I haven't Googled it yet, but because what I need to happen is I need to be able to do that kind of tagging in a Google site, so that and I don't know if you can do that, so that a kid could be labeling or tagging, like a standards or whatever, and then they could search through those labels, and then it would be right on their Google site. So that's sort of my next project, and that way, obviously, because they could have their site, but then they could have their drive, and the things in the drive could be tagged and then referenced on the site, and that would just make things a little bit easier and more accessible.
It would make things easier, but I'm not aware of any tagging in Google per se, which is killing us.
Have you sent any?
What are you using, Maura? Are you using Google Sites?
So we use Google Sites, and that's sort of our presentation piece. We use Blogger for reflection and Drive for sort of the curating. That's where like all the stuff goes. And I really like using Blogger, but I find it limiting because it's so like wordy. Like, we haven't found a good way to upload videos from the iPad onto Blogger, and so all of students' reflections are written, and so I'm struggling with it because I think for students who struggle with language, it's really difficult. But we're using Blogger to answer your question.
Okay, and so it was interesting too, because we're using Blogger for something totally different. It's just free writes, and I don't really. That's just a way of them for expression and free writes, and they haven't seemed to have a problem loading up their blogs, but videos onto their blogs. But we're asking them to put a lot of video onto their Google Sites so that we can see it. And the other thing I'm hoping is that next year that each kid can have their own YouTube channel, and they can start curating
Yeah, we are too.
Those channels. So that's what we have in store. Hopefully.
So John and Maura, I'm going to have to go too, because I have to go and pick up Judith's friend.
Yeah, I should head out as well.
So would you guys be interested in doing another one of these before the February vacation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to see where we are.
Yeah, and I know that's coming up pretty soon, so what I'm going to do is I'll send out prospective dates for everybody. It might happen right before the vacation or maybe right after. I'm not really sure what's going to work for people. But I'll send out invitations, and then we can do this again, and hopefully continue on a regular basis through the rest of the year.
Yeah, I always get really great ideas when I talk to you.
No,
Yeah, same here. I've been writing them down.
He's got them on his
I
cards.
got them on my cards.
I'm
My
wondering.
crazy card.
I'm wondering if
Right.
there's what I'm desperate for is access to examples, and I don't know if there's.
Well, I'm starting to charge for those, though.
Yeah.
I know. Well, that's why I figure I have to push this beyond just done. But I wonder if there's a way that we could be either collaboratively taking notes or just a place where we could dump examples as we think of them in these conversations. Because for me to translate these conversations into conversations with other folks, it hinges on the examples.
Right.
Because we all know what we're talking about, right?
Right.
So one of the things that, just real quickly, is that I have a couple kids who I can ask their parents for permission again, because we're giving a few presentations. I think I'm giving one at St. Mike's, and I'm going to take some kids up there with me. And so I'll get a couple kids who you can have access to. But one thing I'm also thinking about is just making my own PLP page, like just kind of a professional PLP page with examples, and then to put resources onto that. And maybe that's something that we could do using sort of the same PLP template, and then just start piling things into there as a reference site. I don't know if that would fit or if that would work, but it might just be a place for it.
I'll think about it.
Okay.
Because we're going to have another crunch time with the Middle Grades Institute in terms of having a large number of people in desperate need for resources and examples. And
maybe that's what we use it as. We develop a site that has those that then we can give the participants access to when they come.
Yeah.
Or before they come.
And I don't want to put that burden on you guys, but I think if you had a place to kind of dump great ideas in example form, just like you're doing it in verbal form, we could then curate that and put it into a system for other folks to use.
Well, I was talking to James about changing the model that we have. Instead of having just a list of tasks for the kids, to actually make that template I was talking about. So on the bio page, it would actually look like a bio page, but then at the bottom have resources and different ways you could do it, and then include student testimonials.
Yeah, so we're going to break up the tasks so they fit the pages that they're going to work on and align it with that.
I can send you the sample site that we used for helping schools get up and running with one-to-one, and it was trying to meet the same need. You know,
Yeah.
So how do we provide kind of a model and then a bunch of related examples?
Yeah.
And resources.
Well, maybe that's something that could be the topic for the next time we meet, and we could bring better ideas for that.
All right, cool.
All right, thank you everybody for your time and effort.
Thank you.
See you again.
Yeah, have fun skiing.
Have fun skiing. I'm jealous.